"32 spent over a week on the city streets, begging for any food scraps or any water people could spare. This caused him multiple run-ins with the city guards. Some guards were sympathetic and just moved him along, but some city guards that patrolled the area that he usually frequented was known as being extremely cruel, and would rather dispose of a beggar than allow them to be arrested, due to the paperwork and evidence needed to keep them. Two guards were known as the worst, and they saw 32 and became quickly enraged, as this would be the fourth time they spoke to him, and quickly approached him. "You boy, this must be the third, no, fourth time we have seen you and told you to get lost. What are you doing in the streets? Where are your family or your master?" One of the guards spoke with an authoritarian style of speech, and demanded answers while placing his hand on his sword hilt as his voice begins to crack in his enraged state. "I don't have a family or a master. I don't even have a home." 32 spoke slowly as the guard growled at that statement, as anyone without a family or a master is someone who isn't worth anything. The guards slowly approached him and grabbed him, and began to search him for anything suspicious. They looked at each other as 32 began to struggle slightly due to the grip on his body. Within that moment, the guard smirked. "Shall we take this trash in as a repeat offender? Maybe the dogs would have fun with him." The tallest guard grinned and gripped 32's arm tighter in his metallic grip. No, the captain wouldn't be pleased, due to having no evidence being found, and to be honest, he's just a street rat. It would be too much paperwork. Slowly, the guard, who wasn't wearing a helmet, spoke, and with a tone as smooth as a gravel road. "So, what do you propose we do with this urchin?" The tallest guard spoke with venom in his voice, as his vice grip never loosened on 32, as he was too frightened to speak a single word. "Let the vermins have him. He's not worth our time." The helmeted guard walks away as 32 coughs a little blood from a cut within his mouth, and by accident a single droplet landed on the guard's tunic. The guard snarled loudly in an extremely enraged state as he looked down at his tunic and grabbed 32's arm and began to drag him into a nearby alley. The sound of thudding and beatings was apparent as the guard brutally beat him as a punishment for staining the clothes of the city guard. "What if he has the contagion? Wouldn't you be infected?" The helmeted guard spoke as the tallest guard panted and spat down onto the limp body of 32. "If it has the contagion, then it will die, and I'll just take a potion when I get back to the barracks before it has a chance to take hold. Street rats like him deserve nothing but death." The tallest guard looks down at 32 and snarls while giving him a swift kick into the side, causing him to slide across the floor slightly, and with that, the guard then watches his motionless body for a moment before chuckling. After a while, the guards laugh again, leaving the crumpled boy laying on the ground, crying silently and wheezing from the brutality he had just experienced from the people who he thought was his protectors. But the rot of society ran deeper than he thought. Slowly he got up as each of his limbs ached and his stomach growled, needing substance that wasn't contaminated, just like the water he was forced to drink throughout the week. Stumbling into the street, he collapsed to the floor once more, but this time onto the steps of the church, and slowly blacked out from hunger and the pain from the beating earlier. 32 opened his eyes and found that he was being dragged of the main city gate by 2 guards. He was too weak to argue or even protest, but once his body had left the threshold of the city, the guards just threw him into a ditch at the side of the road, like discarded trash or an item of no value. After a while, he found his strength to move once more, but realized the guards wouldn't allow him back in as he was just seen to be thrown out. So, weighing up his options, he decided to move into the nearby forest instead of the Great Plains, as creatures would be able to see him and attack with ferocity, as walking over open lands would give them advantage. Slowly, making his way to the entry of the forest, he began to cough violently, coating the leaves around him in speckles of blood. Fighting to move on, he leant against a large tree and saw a bountiful assortment of fruits and berries. Slowly, he began to feast and devour what he could before his sickness began to cause him to double over in another coughing fit. Laying on the ground, he looked to the sky and noticed it was becoming dark, and without a shelter, he would be at the mercy of the woodland predators. Pulling himself off the ground using a tree as an aid, he slowly began to move forward. Once more, as each step felt like a blade ripping into his limbs, as the beating he endured may have caused some internal damage. Many minutes passed, as the dark began to leak away and the shadows crept in, draining the light from the area. 32 found a small cavern that seemed unoccupied and decided to make a makeshift camp there, as his energy was near enough at rock bottom and he could barely keep his eyes open any longer. Slowly grabbing a large set of leaves and some underbrush, he created a makeshift bed and created a small fire to keep the cold at bay and to scare away any large predators that may be stalking the surrounding zones. Slowly the morning came, as the darkness was fought back by the sunlight of dawn, the fog moving around the ground like wisps of nature's spirits, becoming the new day forth. 32 slowly opened his eyes and began to cough violently, as each breath was like torture, as the contagion causes him to vomit furiously onto the ground. Slowly he raises his head and gets to his feet, knowing that he will die if the contagion isn't seen to by a magical physician. Walking out of his makeshift home, he begins a long journey to find a village, as the city is now locked to him. Most magical physicians in the city demand extremely high prices, but heading north through the dense forest, he began to smell the scent of death linger in the air around him. 32 immediately stops and gets low, so he could follow the smell, as he was hoping it was something he could scavenge from, as his stomach was completely empty from vomiting earlier. Creeping slowly forward, the scent became stronger, until it was nearly unbearable. He knew that he must be close, as the scent is practically burning his senses. Within moments of him moving a few more steps forward, he came into a clearing. Looking around the clearing, he noticed a small carcass laying in the middle of the groves, with a few flies buzzing around its open wounds. 32 smiles and hope filled his heart once more, as he approached the carcass and noticed there was just enough meat left around the body to satisfy his hunger. Slowly he looked around for a sharp rock or a flint to use as a knife, but at that moment snarls emanated around the clearing. Slowly he stood up and looked around and noticed a frantic woman bolting from the edge of the clearing, screaming constantly for aid. as she heads into the center towards a large tree. Behind her was a male direwolf chasing after her as its eyes burned with hunger, as its fur looked tattered and old and riddled with age. Without thinking, 32's body moved on its own and it dashed towards the wolf. While moving forward, the woman screams for help as the wolf begins to lunge at her. However, as the wolf does this, 32 grabs a large club-like log, and before the wolf could strike with his gnarled fangs, 32 lands a strike on the wolf's side with the large log, causing the log to explode into splinters. But this was just enough to send the wolf crashing to the floor with a yelp. The woman freezes in shock from the sudden appearance of a dirty-looking young man from out of the murk of the woods. The wolf slowly got to its feet, and in the time it took to get up, 32 ran over to the carcass that he found earlier and picked it up and dragged it between them and the wolf. Slowly, the wolf snarled and began to approach them once more. The woman begins to hide behind 32, as he never takes his gaze from the great wolf, as it sniffs the carcass that has been thrown between them, hoping that the wolf is only hungry and not bloodthirsty. 32 then carefully watched as the wolf begins to drag away the meat, as a sense of relief washes over him and he begins to relax as the danger has finally passed. But the sense of disappointment as his stomach will remain empty as he sacrificed the carcass to save the woman. Slowly he turned to the woman, but when he did, the woman had already vanished. Slowly he continued moving into the nearby bushes, and after a few moments his head began to swim, as his head and chest became tight and vomit began to rise into his throat. Slowly his vision began to waver, and he collapsed to the floor. Without warning, vomit burst from his stomach, but as it was empty, only bile came out. Slowly laying there, the thought of just not existing anymore came to his mind as he began to pass out from exhaustion as the contagion has progressed even more. Days later, 32 opened his eyes and found himself laid in a bed. This bed was situated in a run-down shack. Looking around, he attempted to move, but was extremely weak, and after a while a door to the shack opened and a tatty-looking old man walked in, holding a tray with bowls and a simple woven cloth. The man looked towards 32 and grunted slightly as he approached him and set the tray at the side of the bed. This old man began mixing herbs, plants, and a strange green liquid. The mixture began to glow as the man poured the glowing liquid onto 32's chest. Once the liquid landed onto his chest, a pain filled his body as each of his nerves seemed to burn individually as it traveled throughout his whole system. Who are you? 32 spoke as each word spoken took a lot of strength to do, as even lifting his head seemed impossible at this moment in time. Be silent, boy, or the magic will only hurt more. The man spoke with a rough but commanding tone as he placed his hand over 32's body and began to chant words that 32 couldn't understand. Once the chant was over, he felt a lot better, but the man just stood up and without a word left the shack, leaving 32 laying there with more questions than answers. A day passed and 32 was able to sit up and move slightly, but the man would only come in and barely speak to him while doing his rounds. After at least 3 days, the man approached 32 and began his usual rounds, as he then nodded and sat down in front of him. That should do it, boy. It may be primitive magic, but you are healed. The contagion inside you has been suppressed. The man spoke with the roughest tone he has ever heard, but once he had heard that the contagion has been suppressed, his heart seemed lighter in his chest. However, that feeling only lasted a short moment. Sir, I don't have anything to give to thank you. I don't have any money or anything to give you. 32 trembled, thinking that this man just healed him, and he hasn't a proper way to pay for such a treatment that would cost over 300 gold pieces in the city. Boy, what do I need money for? The land provides what I need. But there is one thing I do want though. The man looks sternly at 32 as he begins to stand up. What is it, sir? I don't have anything to give. The only thing I have is a baby blanket and this rusty old key. 32 spoke with his head down, trying to think of what he could offer as payment, but once the words left his mouth, the man taps him on the head with a stick. The only thing I want from you is to learn my ways and my teachings. The man looked down at him as he raised the stick from his head, as 32 was baffled and shocked, as such a price is nowhere near as valuable as the treatment he provided. Learn my ways. Carry on my legacy. I am not destined for this world much longer, boy, and I need somebody to follow in my footsteps. The man grumbled as 32 nodded his head and knelt at the man's feet. Once his head was bowed, he had accepted the position of student from the old hermit who healed him. Hiya guys, this is Kindarous. Thank you so much for coming back and listening to the Majjin Return Part 2. Yes, this one was a little bit shorter due to the fact that there was a lot more dialogue in this one than there was in the first one. However, I am still writing it and hopefully the third part will be coming out soon. So please, like, subscribe, follow me on social media. I have Twitter, I have Instagram, I have Facebook now. So yeah, follow me on there and send me a message on Twitter that, you like the content, you don't like the content, here's an idea to make a story behind. So yeah, this is Kindarous signing off, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, and just a little shout out to a few people that have made a little group. They're called themselves the Kinder Cuties. So thank you for the comments and see you in the next one. This is Kindarous signing off.